They are the trailblazers of history.
I am the Chief of Surgical Pathology.
Writing the story of today.
First suggested I go into medical school, which I thought they were crazy.
Their success touches all of our lives, yet far too often, women like them are overlooked, overworked, and underpaid. These are the stories of trailblazing minds, women of science. Now on Scripps News Reports.
I'm Lauren Magarino. Next time you use your car's windshield wipers, you have a woman to thank. That is Mary Anderson. Put on a wrinkle-free shirt. Ruth Rogan Benarito was a chemist and designed it. Save your house from termites. Wow, yikes. Margaret Collins, she had a fix for that. Watch a space launch. Mary Jackson, NASA's first black woman engineer, and Mae Jemison, who was the first black woman in space. You get my point. The list of accomplished women in science and technology is long, yet still, women are vastly underrepresented. For this Women's History Month, we decided to dedicate an episode of Scripps News Reports to telling the stories of today. 3 influential women are on tap to join us. Seema Kumar is a former VP and head of innovation at Johnson & Johnson. She is now CEO at Cure, a healthcare innovation campus in New York. Tracy Fanara is a scientist and environmental engineer working with the nation's Environmental Intelligence Agency. And Meredith Broussard, she's a professor at New York University and is a trailblazing mind on artificial intelligence. In a moment, we'll talk about their journeys to get where they are today, what they had to overcome, how they had to fight. But first this, representation in science and tech isn't just important. It is potentially life-saving. And here's a perfect example why, and I guarantee you haven't even thought of this. You know those crash test dummies that get loaded into cars and then flung into a wall to test safety? Well, it turns out they are almost always men or children, not women. And that fact matters. Take 60 seconds and watch this from Megan Lopez.
The model of the average male that we use today, he was created in the early 70s.
The crash dummy that they use to represent women is just a scaled-down version of the male dummy, and it doesn't represent them well since it's only 4'8" and 105 pounds. It is so small that it doubles as the test dummy for a 12-year-old child. And there are biological differences between men and women that just aren't represented in that dummy, like wider pelvises and less muscle in their necks.
Females are less well protected when it comes to whiplash injuries.
That's why Astrid Linder and her team in Sweden have spent years developing the world's first anatomically correct female crash test dummy. It's 5'3", 137 pounds, and it was made specifically for low-impact rear crashes. She hopes it will give car makers more data for how to make their vehicles safer for everyone.
We aim at, of course, the best protection for everybody. And we cannot expect any car manufacturers, of course, to create something and provide results that isn't asked for even.
Building a smarter dummy. Our thanks to Megan Lopez for bringing us that piece. Let's bring in our panel of accomplished women who have trailblazed a path, frankly, for all of us. And we've already given the introductions, got that out of the way, so let's dig in. Seema, I would love to start with you. You were not born in this country, and yet you ascended to some of the highest levels at some of the most storied institutions. I'm going to brag on you: Johnson & Johnson, MIT, National Institutes of Health, Johns Hopkins. So clearly you've worked hard. Did you have to work harder because you're a woman?
I would say no. That never occurred to me. I was who I was. I am who I am, and I gave everything my all. So I think that in a sense, I never thought about whether I was a woman or a man. I just wanted to be the best that I could be. And it was less about me, it was about what I was going to accomplish. And so throughout the whole journey, I always cared about the big, hairy, audacious goals, or BHAG. And so as long as I was part of something big and making a big impact on the world, that's what motivated me, whether it was the Human Genome Project, whether it was working on the COVID-19 vaccine, whether it's coming to New York City and making this like the center of the universe for innovation. it's all big, hairy, audacious goals. I suppose I'm a big fan of Mission Impossible.
And I think a lot of women could probably relate to exactly that feeling. I'm not focused on, my gender or my sex. I'm just doing the job. Meredith, just 1 in 4 computing-related jobs are held by a woman. The numbers are even more stark when you look at women of color. This is a difficult question to answer concisely, but let's try it. Why is that the case?
I mean, it actually is pretty easy to answer concisely. The reason is sexism. The reason is racism. We had lots of really great diversity efforts in the past. Those efforts have recently been under attack. And, if Silicon Valley, for example, really wanted to move the needle on having a more diverse workforce, they would. And they just simply haven't over time.
Tracy, I want to dig into your story and get your insight on this, because when you look at the bachelor's degrees awarded in the 2020 to 2021 academic year, you see that in business, computing, engineering, men are graduating at a much higher pace than women. And then women are outpacing men in fields like health and education. So moving, to the education background, why do you see typically women's presence in certain STEM fields kind of fall by the wayside? Is it playing off of what Meredith was saying?
It's crazy. During my PhD research, I was a 7th grade science teacher. It was part of my grant and part of my funding. And I realized by being a teacher right then why we lose so many females in science. Like I saw the split, and a lot of it was that the females were maturing faster, they were more creative, so they were trying to get into the arts, and they loved teaching and mentoring, and it just was something that came just so naturally. And then the boys, they weren't into girls yet, and they were still very focused on their work right in front of them. And I think that after starting kids camps and working with kids that age group, I saw how we can change that and how we can direct that, and that's through hands-on learning. Like I have really big hopes for women in STEM moving forward, and I think that percentage of women is just going to keep on growing.
Yeah, well, and a bit later in this half hour, we're going to talk about the actual issues in your fields of expertise, from AI to women's health, but a few more questions on personal journeys here. Tracy, you've said, quote, "For women in STEM, success is a mix of passion and perseverance." How so?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I think that you asked the other two panelists great questions. Was it harder? And for me, actually, I did have to work harder. It is perseverance. And anytime you're in science, 99% of the time you're losing, whether it's a grant or whether it's a failed experiment. You learn all the things that don't work, and you live for that 1% of the time. So it's not only being a female in science, it's just science in general, that you need that perseverance. And if you don't have the passion, it's hard to keep on going. And for me, it's environmental catastrophe from where I'm from that really inspired me to keep on going forward.
Speaking of keep on going forward, Seema, you talked recently about having mixed feelings about still needing a special day to remind people that women are important. You said, quote, "We must celebrate our successes, but our work is not done." What are the battles right now for women in fields like yours?
Yeah, I think, the fact that we need a special day to recognize it as an International Women's Day means that, what about the rest of the 364 days? Aren't women special? I think that, I will talk about, there are so many different factors and statistics that we could, talk about, but let me talk about one thing. Female founders, right, in this whole ecosystem of innovation, female founders still only get 2% of the capital that's available in the world. And for them, it's more difficult to start up a company to raise money than it is for men. So that's just one example. And what we also find is that at the more sort of entry level and junior level and managerial levels of any profession, including STEM and innovation, a high tide does float all boats. But then at one point, then the other boats, there are some boats that keep floating higher and higher, and then the other boats just stay here. So when you get to the higher levels of the organization, that's where you start seeing the big differences, and that's where the drop-off happens. And that's why, at Cure, in the ecosystem, we have a program called Break into the Boardroom, because women need to be, coached and be ready, but also they need to be placed in boards and leadership positions to expose them to, the higher levels of leadership.
I mean, it speaks to what Meredith was talking about. It's blatant sexism in many of these circumstances, racism, at the intersection of both at play. Ladies, hang tight. I want to ask you about some of the most pressing issues in your fields, like should we trust vaccines? Will artificial intelligence lead to job losses? Big question there. Is climate change threatening the future of life? All that next on Scripps News Reports. You are looking inside the first all-girls robotics team in Northeast Ohio public schools. This is in Cleveland. It's just the third overall in the state of Ohio in a field that boys tend to dominate. If you want to turn the tide of men working in 3 of 4 STEM jobs in this country, this is how it starts.
I am the electrical team captain.
18-year-old Jalisa Jones is part of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District's all-new, all-girls robotics team. Only the third all-girls team in Ohio and the first in Northeast Ohio to serve public schools.
How does it feel? Feels really good.
Chelsea Cohn oversees the robotics program.
It's super empowering.
Women represent only about a third of STEM careers. She says this is how we help change that.
This is like girls front and center. They're the sub-team captains, team captain, and they're loving it.
Sherwin-Williams is their main sponsor, providing funding and mentors, who, by the way, include the highest percentage of female mentors.
So we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our partners and our sponsors.
CMSD and Cleveland State University have been working for a decade to make IT careers more accessible and equitable for all students in Cleveland.
Our partnership around computer science is vital to the future of the city and the region.
They tell me it's working. 10 years ago, 3 CMSD high schools offered computer science. Now, 17 do. In 2023, 142 CMSD students had IT internships. 200 are expected this year. And 84 CMSD educators have received computer science training from CSU.
Okay, this might be it. This might be it.
CMSD students recently demonstrated their skills in robotics, coding, apps, video game design, and more at the university.
That is awesome, and it did it. You did a good job.
Go straight, see.
Ohio Lieutenant Governor John Husted was there and said this kind of partnership and training are essential for making our workforce a Midwest leader in tech.
It's important because if you don't have computer science talent, you can't have a thriving economy. Literally, the businesses that are here and that you want to grow and recruit here need that talent.
What we're doing here is not just important for students and their families, but for the city of Cleveland. I think that this is what we need to be focused on. And at the end of the day, it's just giving students access to this type of career.
Jalisa says she discovered and grew her love for technology through her exposure at school.
What does your family think of all this?
My family is really excited, especially my mom. She's been the biggest support so far.
She'll now shine alongside more than a dozen other young women on CMSD's first all-girls robotics team.
I want to tell people that anyone can do anything that they want. If you have a love for robotics, technology, there's space for you.
Katie Usen, Scripps News.
This is our Women's History Month edition of Scripps News Reports, focusing on the trailblazing minds of women in science. I am rejoined by our panel, leading women in health, computer science, and climate change. We've talked about your personal stories. Now let's talk about your areas of expertise. Tracy, you started Inspector Planet, which you bill as part of the, quote, mission to extend humanity's time on Earth. I read that and I was like, oh, it feels kind of doomsday-y, but to what extent does climate change threaten life as we know it?
You know, climate change is going to make life different, more difficult. We cannot continue business as usual. That is basically what it's going to get more expensive, and it's going to require big changes. And it's so sad to look back through our existence as humans and see that we don't do something until it's too late, until all other options are exhausted. We're not really proactive And we have to start being proactive. We have to start learning from our past mistakes and start moving forward in a smarter way, saving money up front instead of kicking the can down the road, which is what we've been doing. But in addition to climate change and contributing to climate change, our air quality, our water quality, our soil, land, and our sixth mass extinction, all of this coming together, sustainability is near impossible. And that's where Inspector Planet comes from. It's the combination of Captain Planet and Inspector Gadget. Sustainability can't be reached without innovation. And that's where the AI comes in, and that's where healthcare comes in.
Well, you gave me the perfect segue here because, Seema, you were involved in the race to create a COVID vaccine. Listen, there are still doubts about its safety, despite evidence verifying, re-verifying its safety. What would you say to people who believe the COVID vaccine was developed too fast to be safe, or who are against vaccines in general?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, people have to educate themselves. I think a little bit of literacy and some, data gathering would help us separate fact from fiction. The fact of the matter is that we were able to pull off a miracle, which is to bring forward a vaccine, not one, but 3 different vaccines in record time. And that's why we're all walking around not wearing masks anymore. But I think it brings up a big challenge, which is what your question is. And that challenge is this notion of trust and the notion of equity. So trust is a big factor, because if we really are to leverage the promise that AI brings to healthcare and transform healthcare and move us from sick care to healthcare, then we need the power of AI. And AI only works if you have data. And data means that everybody is willing to share their data and trust institutions, governments, and others to be responsible with that data.
Let me actually interject here, because I know that Meredith's ears are probably perking up, especially right now, because Meredith, and I don't get mad at me, ladies, for saying this, but she knows probably more about AI than all of us combined. So to Seema's point, I do want to ask you about AI and misinformation, and AI and job security. So job security first. Should we be concerned about our jobs?
So there is no robot takeover coming. There's no AI apocalypse coming. But what I do think people need to be concerned about is poor business decisions motivated by aspirations around AI. So if you are in a company where people are saying things like, well, we're going to try and replace the workers with AI, well, that is a poor business decision right now, because the AI does not really work as well as most people would like to imagine, and it definitely does not work as well as marketers would like everybody to imagine.
You're like, don't believe everything that's being put out there, because the marketers, they're working hard. Well, Meredith Broussard, Seema Kumar, Tracy Fanara, we could talk for much, much longer. But for now, thank you so much for all of the things that you do. Your work inspires so many women and girls across the country. Our lives are better for it. And thank you for taking time to share your insight and stories with us. We appreciate it. And folks, we're back in a moment.
Historically speaking, there have never been as many women working in computer sciences as men. But here at the University of Michigan, women working in artificial intelligence are working to change that. Do you see as many women in your classes as men?
No, I wish. There is a lack of diversity broadly in computer science, even more so in AI.
Typically a very male-dominated field.
I think that's a problem, because we really need everyone at the table, since we build technology that impacts everyone.
Rada Mihalcha is the director of the Artificial Intelligence Lab at the University of Michigan, a lab made up of both brilliant men and women who all supported publishing this on their website, Women of AI, an explainer of how the women Michigan faculty members here are leading the way in AI research. This work will shape the next generation of computer sciences. And it's very important that it's coming from women, as a 2020 World Economic Forum report found that women only make up 26% of data and AI positions in the workforce, even though women make up roughly 47% of the U.S. labor force. Mihalcha tells me this isn't because of a lack of interest from women, but because historically women get pushed out of the computer sciences. She says women were the first to work in computer sciences decades ago, before it became a primarily male-dominated field. And now?
History repeats itself. AI is really very lucrative. So again, a lot of people want in, and some people are pushed out.
To the team of male and female AI researchers at Michigan, it is imperative that women and people of all backgrounds work in AI, as many biases can be traced back to a lack of diversity.
There's actually some studies that look at, if you look at any one specific model, you can actually look at what kind of biases that model has learned. And that can be, very likely traced to the kind of data that has been fed to it.
In the near future, it is likely that most all adults and children alike will be using AI to search for answers and create their own work. The potential for both benefits and harm is great.
I think this is the best time, and maybe the worst time, to work on AI.
These researchers tell me that in order for the most amount of people to benefit from artificial intelligence, this work, the work of women, is not just needed, but required.
It's mandatory that we have representation in order to design tools that would positively impact everyone and not just a segment of the population.
Sarah Michaels, Scripps News, Detroit.
There are not enough women and girls in science. 1 in 4 computing-related jobs are held by women, and women are underrepresented in important roles, from the government to large corporations. Think of yourself, or maybe the women and girls in your life, and dream of a better future for them. One with equal pay for equal work, equal opportunity, just simply equality. Now, let's do what we can to create that future. Thank you for joining us. Reporting from Atlanta, I'm Lauren Magarino for Scripps News Reports.